Alright, welcome back to another devlog. This is number 22. So after kind of a rough week last time, it felt like I wasn't making much progress, and I was kind of trying to hash out this level loading prototype, and 1 week was just not long enough to get the job done. I was making progress, but I still hadn't quite got to where I wanted to be with it. So starting on Monday, I went back to the drawing board, and I had to do a lot of testing to kind of get it right. I had a whole bunch of tools, um, but I had to kind of start from the beginning and kind of figure out how to salvage this prototype. Because what I had before with the advanced scene manager loading, um, yeah, the advanced scene manager loading, the different sections, the different scene sections, and then the sector scene loader. It was just it was too choppy. So I was really diving into the technology of entities and addressables, and I did a bunch of testing. So entities are really great. They load super fast. But the problem with that, it's a whole different system, and you kind of have to build like a layer in between to kind of mesh the two systems together. I could see myself using entities for things like the background, things that are not inside the player box that the player can interact with, but just like background mesh renderers. They load super fast and they take, it's just like, yeah, I think I'd use entities for that. But using entities for these different these different sectors and different scene sections. The problem was it would render the mesh, but I'd fall right through because the colliders aren't included in entities. You have to have a separate physics layer, and it's a whole bunch more programming, and that just wasn't gonna work. So I moved on to testing entities with addressables, and that seemed to do the trick. The actual loading of the next scene was pretty fast. As you can see, there's a little bit of a chop inside the editor. But I figured out that I could actually, just throw away the encapsulated entities altogether and just use a lightweight addressables loading sync. And that seemed to be the way to go. Doing testing and just inputting a key and seeing, the performance of just loading an addressable scene. That seemed to be what I was looking for. So yeah, Monday I did a lot of testing to really nail down what worked, what technology worked, what I was going to go with. And I pretty much decided on using like a lightweight, getting rid of ASM scene loading and sector scene loading. It was just too much overhead. I wanted to keep the sectors for other reasons, like maybe I needed to use audio, and the occlusion seemed to work pretty well without, so I wanted to keep instead of using Unity's occlusion and baking, I wanted to use sector occlusion. That seemed to work. So I wanted to keep sectors around, not just go, ditch sectors altogether. But I threw away the sector scene streaming and the ASM scene streaming because those systems, there's just too much overhead using those systems, and you get these big frame dips every time a scene is loaded in and out. So my lightweight solution for using addressable scene loading when you transition through a trigger to unload and load scenes, there is a little hitch in the editor. But when you do a build, I'll show you this next. there is actually, if you look at the frame, the actual frame performance, you'll see that it's exactly what we're looking at. So you look down in the right-hand corner, 120 frames inside of a build. That's fantastic, right? You know, but the real trick is when you cross over a trigger loader to load the next scene. So this is a lightweight solution. I'm not using Advanced Scene Manager or sector loading. You can see up at the top there, the previous scene hasn't loaded in yet. As soon as I cross over the trigger, you take a look at the FPS down at the bottom, was 128, 127. As soon as we cross over, it goes down to 109. I mean, and there is no noticeable, there's no noticeable frame hitch. So that's exactly what we want to happen. Something going on with the lighting there, but I'm not interested in that. But yeah, it's smooth. It loads the next scene, and you can't really see it in the build, but it's unloading the next scene at the same time as you're going through. This is what we want. So nice and smooth. This is the system. This is the system that we want to build the game on, and this is it's like I'm happy with this system. So so there was, I spent Tuesday and Wednesday refactoring my old solution, my old prototype solution to work with addressables. There was some caveats with using addressables, having to learn about, it's not a whole entirely different system, but there's some things you kind of have to, work around, some issues that in order to use addressables instead of just regular scene loading. I wanted to make each one of these sector chunks an addressable scene, so I refactored the actual sector code to use addressables and tested that out. But that showed that it didn't work. It was just as choppy as just using regular scenes, and that's probably because of using the sector system overhead. It's really not necessary with the sector occlusion. The sector occlusion just takes away the mesh renderers, and that's enough performance. It's just loading and unloading different scenes. If you get too far away from them, that's what I needed, the scene streaming. So I reworked my original prototype into this, and it's back to where it was, loading backwards and forwards, no issues all the way through. So by the end of Thursday, or beginning halfway through Thursday, I was able to finish up and get this all working, and it works pretty nicely in the build. So after all that was done, I wanted to start working on the actual functionality to so if you're going through the game and you're either you have checkpoints or something, or whatever it is, you're in a certain portion of the game, you're in a certain level, you're in a certain section, a certain scene, or you're in a certain sector. I wanted to kind of like how I do, kind of like how I be able to save persistence with the character's position and rotation. I wanted to be able to save that data where you're at within the game, right? That way I could take that data and I can, from the start of the game, I can actually take that data and load the appropriate portion of the game. That's the idea. So in order to start doing that, I needed a way to kind of figure out, what's the data, where am I in the game. So I built a little bit of UI that I wanted to see up in the, it's a camera overlay. Basically, you can see as I'm going through, they kind of, okay, you're in room D, hallway D. It reports the actual sector that you're in, room C, and at the top it reports what scene you're in. So we're in level 1 scene 3, and if we cross over the scene marker, okay, now we're in scene 2, right? And so if we go and say, now we say save, it'll save that data to persistence. It's all tied up with scriptable objects and everything like that. So let's just say we go down here. So it'll put me back to where I was on the load. That's great. I actually haven't tested what happens if you, like in-game, if you go to a different, wonder what'll happen. Kind of curious. So if that portion of the game is actually unloaded, well, I don't think I can go that far, but I'll test that later. Yeah, it'll actually load to where you are. So in game, that's not really a use case right now. The use case is actually when you want to. So we saved it here. Okay, we saved that data. Let's just pretend that we are going to start the game again. So once I saved the data and put it to the UI, then I had to hook up on Friday. I worked on building a whole new profile in Scene Manager to kind of handle this new system. And show it here, where basically we're gonna have a scene. Instead of saying don't destroy on load for the game manager, we're going to have it be in its own persistent scene. And this game manager will exist from the very start of the game and go all the way through and manage the entire state of the game and never really go away, right? So it's in its own persistent scene via the scene manager. And the game manager, one more responsibility, it's going to kind of handle the initial process. It's going to work alongside the scene manager to kind of load the appropriate so it's gonna on the initialization, it's gonna load up the persistent data to, you know, where was the player, you know, what level, what scene, what sector, and it's gonna take that information and figure out, you know, which, and it's gonna work with Advanced Scene Manager, and it's gonna say, okay, which scene do we want to select that's gonna load when we call to load the collection? Is it gonna be 1, 2, 3? So right now it's set to 1, but the algorithm will actually set this one as selected when it loads. So let's just play this. I had to modify the scene data and actually load the neighbors in correctly. So now we're not just always loading on scene 1. Now with the save data, we could potentially load on any sort of scene. So I have to, whatever scene you're loading on, it has to load the correct neighbors correctly to where you are. So okay, so game manager, it's doing the loading bar, and it's loading in scene 2 and 3 and 1 because we were on scene 2. There it is. So these ones are not automatic. This one is automatic, and there it is. It placed me right where I was, with scene 3 ahead of it and scene 1 behind, and everything's great. You know, that is what we're looking for, and everything's still working as it should. The occlusion, the additional scene loading, unloading, what have you. So by end of Friday, I got that working. One of the things that for next week is going on is the actual loading process. Everything works fine, and I kind of, my systems were solid enough to work without any major issues as far as connecting each other and loading properly, and that was great. So I dodged a lot of bullets by doing some good prototyping work, having a semi-solid system. But one of the things working with Advanced Scene Manager, it does an intermediate loading screen, but it doesn't. I have a multi-step process. I want to load the levels before I load the actual character in there, just so he doesn't fall through the ground. But loading multiple, so we have our loading scene. It's calling load on this level collection, and that's great. But then it doesn't cover the additional step of loading this other collection, as you know, cover the loading screen for the whole thing. So it loads the scene, and then, so I want the loading screen to go all the way through, and then you see this scene without that, and that step where the character isn't there. So that's what I have to figure out next week, and not just a basic loading screen with a loading bar, but implementing my own custom loading screen with nice graphics, and using that with the scene manager framework. So there's probably a way to do it, but I have to kind of mess around with it to get it to work. So that's work for next week. But overall, I think I had a pretty productive week. I got through the mire of the prototype, and I got it to working where I can actually feel comfortable of building a game on top of this level loading system. I know how it works, and I could definitely have a performant game. I'm assuming the size of the scenes will have to be seen, but as far as like basic loading performance, it's actually there with addressables. We're not running into this choppy game that we had initially from last week. So good progress. And I think that's about all I have to say for this week. Thanks for joining in, and we'll talk to you next time.